Good evening, ma'am. Here is my report is all about utilitarianism and pragmatism. Utilitarianism is the idea that the moral worth of an action is solely determined by its contribution to overall utility in maximizing happiness or pleasure as summed among all people. It is then the total utility of individuals which is important here, the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. Utility, after which the doctrine is named, is a measure in economics of relative satisfaction from or desirability of the consumption of goods. Utilitarianism can thus be described as a quantitative and reductionistic approach to ethics. So, ang utilitarianism ma-describe nato sa kadaghanon ug sa pagtuki kuno sa ethics. Utilitarianism starts from the basis that pleasure and happiness are intrinsically valuable, that pain and suffering are intrinsically disvaluable, and that anything else has value only its causing happiness and preventing suffering, instrumental or as means to an end. This focus on happiness or pleasure as the ultimate end of moralization makes it a type of hedonism, and is sometimes known as hedonistic utilitarianism. Utilitarians support equality by the equal consideration of interest and reject any arbitrary or kaugalingotong gusto distinction as to who is worthy concern and who is not, and any discrimination between individuals. Is it a form of consequentialism in that the moral worth of an action is determined by its outcome or consequence? The end justifies the means, as opposed to deontology, which disregard the consequences of performing an act when determining its moral worth, and to virtue ethics, which focuses on character rather than rules or consequences. History of utilitarianism. The origins of utilitarianism are often traced back to the Epicureanism of the followers of the Greek philosopher Epicurus. It can be argued that David Hume and Edmund Burke were proto-utilitarians, but as a specific school of thought is generally credited to the English philosopher Jeremy Bentham. Bentham found pain and pleasure to be the only intrinsic values in the world, and this he derived the role of utility, that the good is whatever brings the greatest happiness to the greatest number of people. Bentham himself, however, attributed the origins of the theory to Joseph Priestley, the English scientist, theologian, and the founder of Unitarianism in England. Bentham's foremost proponent was James Mill, and his son John Stuart Mill, who was educated from a young age according to Bentham's principles. In his famous 1861 short work, Utilitarianism, John Stuart Mill both named the movement and refined Bentham's original principles. Mill argued that cultural, intellectual, and spiritual pleasures are of greater value than mere physical pleasure, as valued by a competent judge, which, according to Mill, is anyone who has experienced both the lower pleasures and the higher. The classic utilitarianism of Bentham and Mill influenced many other moral philosophers and the development of many different types of consequentialism. Types of utilitarianism. Utilitarianism states that when faced with a choice, we must first consider the likely consequences of potential actions in that particular case, and from that, choose to do what we believe will generate and most overall happiness. Utilitarians may follow certain rules of thumb to save time or cost, although if the consequences can be calculated relatively clearly, exactly, and easily, then such rules of thumb can be ignored, and the choice treated on a case-by-case basis. Role utilitarianism states that when faced with a choice, we must look at potential roles of action to determine whether the generalized role produces more happiness than otherwise, if it were to be constantly followed. Thus, an action should only be carried out if it follows a rule that morally should be followed at all times. Role utilitarians may agree that there are some general exemption rules that allow the breaking of other rules if this increases happiness. The exemption of self-defense to overcome the general rule never to kill a human, although critics that this logically just reduces act utilitarianism. So to end my discussion, let me add some points to remember. The difference between utilitarianism and pragmatism. Pragmatism refers to various things in philosophy, while utilitarianism is a kind of conceptualism that says we should maximize something like happiness, pleasure, or reference satisfaction. It may also help decisions that have the highest favorable impact by weighing the positive and negative. So, that could be all. Thank you.